Здравствуйте, господин Nandan Unnikrishnan. Очень приятно с вами говорить. 20 лет назад вы был мой босс, руководитель, so as to speak. But it's not just 20 years since then, it's also 20 years since the declaration of the India-Russia strategic partnership. Now, before I get into that, just the developments in Moscow, which took most by surprise. President Putin, in his address to the nation, announcing constitutional reform or the plan for constitutional reform and more powers to the Prime Minister and the Parliament. Now, we'll have to look at it through the looking glass of 2024, I presume. President Putin is not going to just walk off into the Siberian sunset.
Здравствуйте, Amitabh, Revi. Действительно 20 лет. It is 20 years since we last had a major treaty between India and Russia. It is, as luck would have it, also 20 years since we worked together.
Yeah.
But talking about Putin's address to the Federal Assembly, I think this was quintessential vintage Putin. You know, taking everyone by surprise, and even after doing something, leaving people befuddled as to what is the end outcome going to be. There is no doubt, and you're absolutely right, that it has to be looked at through the prism of 2024. Yeah. Putin recognizes that his constitutional term comes to an end, and he had 2 or 3 options. One is to change the constitution to allow himself to continue as president.
But that he probably wouldn't have picked because they saw what happened when the swapping happened in 2012 and then there were protests. Maybe that's why he didn't choose the simplest.
He didn't want to continue. In any case, I think Mr. Putin also recognizes that it is better that he is alive when the transition takes place, so that with his rich experience he can guide whoever and whatever the new system is, rather than drop dead in his boots and then have chaos. Possible chaos, not necessary, but possible chaos. So, to that extent, 2024 is an important sort of vector in this decision making. I would say that the reforms that he has proposed, as you pointed out, strengthening the parliament, giving the parliament an oversight in terms of appointing the cabinet, which earlier they did not do. They merely approved the prime minister. But even their approval to the prime minister was conditional, because if they did not do it twice, they would be dismissed by the president. Whereas now what he's done is he's making approval of parliament a condition to approval of the prime minister's job. So I think that's a significant change. Some Russian commentators are even saying it's indicating a revolutionary change, because it is really diluting the powers of the president. There is no doubt that he is diluting the powers of the presidency. And he is increasing the political weight of the parliament. But it is still unclear what he sees as a final role for himself.
Is it going to be another 2008 where the current appointed prime minister, who was a little-known technocrat, is actually the president in waiting and then he takes over?
I don't think that, that was a one-time sort of
then
play.
It's a Russian State Council which he already heads. Which is key.
So I think there will be something which will be fleshed out about the State Council, where he has made Medvedev the deputy. In fact, effectively, if the Russian president is the head of the council and Medvedev is his direct deputy, he becomes like a vice president, So all I'm saying is it's a bit too early for us to judge what the final outcome will be. But 2 things, and you're absolutely right in both. These are very, very important changes in Russia, and these are made with an eye on 2024.
So Dmitry Medvedev, who you're talking about, would be de facto the vice president in the council. Is he being used as a fall guy for the protests, against both the economy and the pension reform?
I would say yes and no. Because, yes, the economy was
You
beginning
blame
to...
it on him. He's gone,
he's
so to
gone.
speak.
And-
Next year there are parliamentary elections where
So
the Russia...
you've dissipated some of the anger. That's true. But at the same time, normally what you don't do is someone who you are making the scapegoat is not someone you promote to a higher position. You do kick upstairs, but this is to a different level. So Putin has done two things. One is he has reiterated to people who are loyal to him that he will never ditch them. And the second level is he addressed the people by saying, I've heard you. I understand that the economic situation is deteriorating. And in his speech itself, he pointed that out, that some measures have to be undertaken. He addressed demographics and all kinds of things. I think he is trying to kill two birds with one stone and probably will succeed.
Well, the foreign ministry has also made it clear that there's going to be no change in India-Russia ties with this new cabinet, and that's. But Sergey Lavrov was here, and technically now I presume we should call him acting foreign minister since the whole cabinet has quit. But just his statements at Raisina Dialogues when he picked up the Indo-Pacific concept, and he critiqued the Western Indo-Pacific concept, the US-led Indo-Pacific, because that was clearly excluding China. But he did say that our Indian brothers have
different.
Yeah, they are different. The Prime Minister in Singapore itself in 2018 said it's open, peaceful, inclusive everybody. Why did he pick that particular topic to speak about in India? The closeness of Russia and China?
Well, there are two elements to it. One is we have been actively promoting the concept of the Indo-Pacific. We also have been trying to use the Vladivostok-Chennai corridor to reflect that kind of linkages between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. The Russians, for them, their primary adversary today in the world is the United States. And as far as the United States is concerned, they have in an official document declared Russians to be an adversary along with China. So therefore, in this particular situation, it would not be wise, presumably from a Russian perspective, to also alienate China. And when you know that the US concept of the Indo-Pacific is directed against China, because even from our perspective, we are unhappy with the fact that the Indo-Pacific understanding of the United States stopped, at least till today, till yesterday rather, stopped at the western shores of India. It did not involve the eastern seaboard of Africa, not even the West Asian region. So now, of course, yesterday suddenly there is a joint statement which says that no, the US and India also see the Indo-Pacific as inclusive and is not directed against anyone or any one country. So in that sense, Lavrov can pat himself on the back and say that, look, after my speech, the Americans were forced to adjust. But why did he pick on it? Yes, because they value the relationship with India and they don't want this conceptual difference which arises out of their strategic understanding of the world to create misunderstandings between what they consider a close partnership with India.
When you look at India itself, in the Indo-Pacific, we're working with China, and we will have to work with China because they are neighbors, and the Foreign Minister has said as much. But there is still that wariness with 1,000 pinpricks that the Chinese will keep having, or slashes of the sword, so as to speak.
I agree with you. I mean, I think there will be more than just a wariness. There is a very deep suspicion of the Chinese intent. What do the Chinese intend to do with their growing power? We are very uneasy with the way they are rising rapidly. And in fact, one of the reasons why growing closeness with the United States is precisely that. We feel that this rise of China has to be managed, not contained, but managed in a manner where it does not upset the equilibrium that exists.
Is the Quad part of that managing? Now there are reports that Australia could also be re-invited for the Malabar exercise.
The Quad, I think, is part of our overall cooperation on security grounds. and is not, while it's part of the Indo-Pacific, again, it is not directed against anyone. In fact, that is what we have also told the Russians, I'm told, that the Quad is not a closed door thing. It is an understanding.
But I mean, Japan, Australia is becoming more aware of the Chinese influence.
I think we are very clear that we want the Quad because we would like to maintain our predominance or preeminence in the Indian Ocean region. And if the four navies are there together. But if you notice one important thing, and that is right in what Lavrov also pointed it out, that the concept of the Indo-Pacific, when we discuss it along with our Western partners, or Japan, or, well, not Japan, but Australia, is primarily security driven, right? Whereas when we, the Prime Minister in Shangri-La, when he enunciated it, he had a strong economic angle to it. We talked about ASEAN centrality, and even with Japan, when we talk about it, we're talking of the Freedom Corridor, connecting to Africa and all. So that is one serious drawback that we have when we are talking of the Quad and Indo-Pacific with the United States. But hopefully the US will also understand and respond, and at least on the surface, yesterday the response seemed very quick and very positive.
You mentioned the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor that was talked about in the summit in Vladivostok between the Prime Minister and President Putin. Now, what is envisaged there is it's not just Chennai-Vladivostok, it actually goes to the tip of South Arctic because of the Russian connection there. So it's significant if it's viable and it actually works.
No, of course. Look, when today in the world there are several new concepts floating around. Indo-Pacific is one of them. There is this whole concept of a greater Eurasia from Lisbon to Jakarta, all that. So if you now take the Eurasian supercontinent, that is Europe and Asia, together as one supercontinent, then the Indian, the Pacific and the Arctic are the waters of that supercontinent. Mm-hmm. So the linkages between the Arctic, Pacific and Indian Ocean are natural. The second thing is, there is little doubt about it, that using the Arctic as a sea route, if it is navigable, at least for 6 to 8 months a year, will cut down costs and timings by almost 1/3. So it does make a significant economic sense. It makes significant economic sense for India to be interested in that. The third is, India believes that India aspires to be a leading power. And because it aspires to be a leading power, it should be in all areas of what we consider global commons, where rules of use or management are being decided. We should be at the high table. So the Arctic is also a global commons. It is nobody's lake in that sense, whether it is the littoral states. Of course, they have the council and they have the right to decide, and everyone else is as an observer there. But the point is, you are there. And China and India are part of the Arctic Council.
You talked about Eurasia. Now, India and the Eurasian Free Trade Agreement is also being negotiated. Considering the fact that we didn't sign RCEP for domestic reasons because we thought our markets would be flooded, is that something that we should be part of?
No, there is a significant difference between what we were to do with RCEP and what the Free Trade Agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union is, right? RCEP is a trade bloc where certain standards and certain obligations, along with rights, of course, come on each of the members. We were probably not ready for that, because then it would control the way goods would come, the tariffs we would impose on them. The FTA with the Eurasian Union, Economic Union, is somewhat different. And we are signing it because we are looking at a non-tariff entry for our goods into that region. And then when you look at it, you have Belarus, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Kazakhstan. These are the members of the Eurasian Union. So this is a fairly large market. And it will be particularly beneficial, for example, for our pharmaceutical industry. So these are, I think we are being driven by benefits, which is exactly the opposite of what happened in RCEP, because we saw a lot of negatives. Here we don't see those negatives, and that is why we are pushing it. So national interest is always predominant.
Defense and security, the S-400 is talked about a lot. Russians have gone on record to say by 2025 we'll have all 5 squadrons in India. They're working also on unplugging deals like this from the dollar, so as to speak, because of the sanctions that could come from the US. But there's a larger worry there, or you think the US is doing it with Turkey when they bought a similar platform?
See, let's be very clear. The sanctions regime, CAATSA, is currency neutral. It doesn't matter whether you pay in rupees, dollars, yuan, whatever. It's just simpler that you have a rupee-ruble arrangement whereby your funds cannot be stopped. Because if you use the SWIFT method or the dollar, then the funds would be routed through some banks, which are very often American controlled, and therefore the funds could be stopped. This way you're ensuring the funds are not stopped. So that is the only thing. Whether sanctions will be applied or not is a function of your diplomacy. If the United States believes that India is an important ally in the Indo-Pacific region, then it should also automatically understand that a weak India is not a very good ally, that India has to be strong economically and consequently militarily. And therefore, if India is strengthening itself militarily, it should not impede that process. I think so far we've been successful in convincing the United States, and the United States has been very rational about it up to now. But, the political climate within the US today is unpredictable. So we'll have to wait and see what transpires after the 2020 elections. And my personal gut feel is that we are not likely to be significantly affected by any sanctions by the United States, because the United States also understands that there are red lines that it cannot cross with India. And that, India is not what is a traditional ally. That this is a new type of a relationship that has to be worked out.
The Prime Minister in Vladivostok, the 1 billion soft credit line that was announced for joint partnerships in the Russian Far East. Now, there is a huge potential there for both partners.
Absolutely. In fact, the potential is across multiple spheres, starting with mining, you can go on to agriculture, and of course, oil and gas. Timber, diamonds. I mean, these are smaller in terms of number. So the question is, the Indian government will have to be able to enthuse Indian companies to go and utilize. So one of the reasons for giving that 1 billion is to presumably enthuse them to go there. Because at the end of the day, Amitabh, there is one very, very important thing to remember. A majority, more than 80% of our economy resides in the private sector. So you cannot have a strong, robust economic relationship only through government entities. You need to get the private sector involved. And the projects in mining or agriculture or diamonds, timber, these are all private sector projects. So basically, measures have to be taken to get the Indian private sector to see the benefits, the ability to make profits in that region.
And it's not just down on earth that India and Russia are cooperating in various spheres. The Gaganyaan training program and all the
just left.
That's also something that Russia is contributing hugely towards.
Yes, I mean, our space cooperation with the Russians has sort of proceeded with fits and starts. There have been drawbacks, there have been positives. But in the past 2 years, and I credit this to the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin in Sochi in 2018 in May, I think after that meeting, a lot of the understanding between the leaderships of the two countries improved dramatically. Their personal chemistry clicked, and since then you find that the relationship has been kind of re-energized. And you're seeing all this Gaganyaan and S-400 and a lot of other things, the lease of the second nuclear submarine, all these things are happening. So I think Prime Minister Modi feels personally invested because the Russians are the only ones who have so far, at least on paper, successfully responded to the Make in India project, with the rifle project and all. So I think Prime Minister Modi recognizes that the Russians are willing to do more and he wants to squeeze the maximum possible.
Господин Nandan Unnikrishnan, спасибо за ваше времени. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Amitabh.